You ever stop and think about those huge, well-intentioned programs? Things like Head Start or even something like Sesame Street. I mean, on the surface, they seem like fantastic ideas, right? But how do we know if they actually work? How do we get past just feeling good about them and find out if they're truly making a difference? Well, that's what we're going to get into. And really, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? When we're trying to make things better, in schools, in public health, even at our jobs, a good feeling or a hunch just isn't enough. We need cold, hard proof. So how in the world do we get it? Okay, so for scientists, there's one tool that stands above all the rest when it comes to finding that proof. If you want to know, without a doubt, that A caused B, you need what's called a true experiment. This is the absolute gold standard. It's how you get a clear, undeniable answer. So what exactly makes an experiment true? Well, think of it like a recipe with 3 essential ingredients. First, you have to actually do something. That's your intervention, your program, your treatment. Second, you need a ton of control over the whole situation. And third, and this one is absolutely key, you have to have a proper comparison group. You need something to measure your results against. Otherwise, how would you know if you made a difference at all? But of all those ingredients, there's one that's the real secret sauce. The one thing that makes a true experiment so powerful, and it's this: random assignment. All that means is that every single person in the study has an equal random chance of being put in the group that gets the treatment or the group that doesn't. And why is that so important? Because it's our best shot at making sure the two groups are basically identical before we even start. Any differences we see at the end, we can be pretty darn sure they came from our treatment. Now, that all sounds fantastic in a nice, clean, controlled laboratory setting, doesn't it? But here's the thing. The real world is messy. It's not a lab. And when you try to take this perfect, gold standard experiment out into the wild, into real schools, hospitals, and companies, well, things get complicated fast. Right off the bat, researchers run into some huge hurdles. I mean, first, you've got to get permission from whoever's in charge, the school board, the CEO, you name it. Then you actually have to get access to the people you want to help. But honestly, the biggest roadblock is often an ethical one. Think about it. Is it really fair to withhold a program that could be genuinely helpful from one group of people just so you can have a clean experiment? That's a really tough pill to swallow. So if the gold standard true experiment is off the table, what then? Well, this is where things get tricky. We open ourselves up to what scientists call threats to internal validity. Now that sounds super academic, so I like to think of them as villains, these sneaky forces that can fool us, making us think our program worked when it really didn't. All right, let's check out the rap sheet for a few of these usual suspects. First up, you've got the villain called history. This is when some totally unrelated event happens out in the world and messes up your results. Then there's maturation. This one's simple. People just change on their own over time. Kids get older and their reading skills improve naturally, not just because of your fancy new program. And then there's a really clever, really sneaky villain called regression. And this is where we meet the Sports Illustrated jinx. You've probably heard of it, right? An athlete has a mind-blowing performance, gets on the cover of the magazine, and then their next performance is kind of meh. Is it a curse? No way. It's this villain, regression to the mean. See, an amazing performance is always a mix of incredible skill and a little bit of good luck. The next time out, their skill is still there, but that burst of amazing luck probably isn't, so their performance naturally regresses or moves back toward their normal average. This is how we get fooled into thinking a special program for, say, the lowest scoring students worked, when really they just went from a super unlucky day to a more normal one. So, if a true experiment is often impossible, and these villains are lurking around every corner, are we just doomed? Do we just give up? Absolutely not. This is where researchers get really clever. They have a smart, practical compromise for real-world research. It's called the quasi-experiment. So what's the big difference? What's the one thing that separates a true experiment from a quasi-experiment? It all comes down to that secret sauce we talked about, random assignment. A true experiment has it, a quasi-experiment does not. Instead, you work with groups that already exist, 2 different classrooms in the school, 2 different branches of a company. You get the idea. One of the most common ways to do this is called the non-equivalent control group design. It sounds complicated, but it's not. You take your 2 existing groups, say 2 different 3rd grade classes, you give them both a pretest. Then you give your new reading program to one of the classes. After a while, you give them both a post-test. You're looking to see if the class that got the program improved more than the one that didn't. And don't think for a second that these are some weak second-best option. Quasi-experiments can be incredibly powerful. Take a look at this real-world example. Researchers studied hospital admissions for heart attacks in Bowling Green, Ohio. They looked at the data for years before the city banned smoking in public places and for years after. And what did they find? A huge, unmistakable drop in heart attack admissions right after the ban went into effect. That's not a true experiment, but wow, does it tell a powerful story? All right, so let's tie all of this together. Let's look at a classic study that shows how these ideas can be used to figure out what works for a really important, very human problem. Back in the 1970s, two researchers, Ellen Langer and Judith Rodin, were looking at a sad reality in many nursing homes, the decline in health and spirit among residents. And they had a really powerful idea. What if a big part of that decline was because residents felt they had no control over their own lives? What if giving them back a little bit of personal choice could make a real difference? So they designed a brilliant quasi-experiment. They couldn't randomly assign residents, of course, so they used two different floors of a nursing home. On one floor, they gave the residents a talk emphasizing their personal responsibility. They were encouraged to make their own decisions about things like arranging their room, their schedules. They were even given a house plant and told, "This is your plant to take care of." Meanwhile, on the comparison floor, the residents got a talk that emphasized how the staff was there to take care of everything for them. They also got a plan, but they were told, "The nurses will water this for you." The results were incredible across the board. The responsibility group became happier, more active, and even healthier. But my favorite piece of data is this one little clever thing they did. The researchers held a contest on the floor to guess how many jelly beans were in a jar. Now get this. From the group that was encouraged to be independent and take responsibility, 10 residents decided to enter the contest. And from the comparison group, the one where everything was done for them, just one. That one little detail says everything, doesn't it? It shows a huge difference in just being engaged with life. Which brings us back to you. I want you to think about some program or initiative in your own community. Maybe it's a new teaching style at the local school or a wellness program at your job. You probably have a gut feeling that it's a great thing, that it's working. But the next time you think that, I want you to pause and ask yourself, how could I really know? What are the chances one of those villains is fooling me? And what kind of evidence, what kind of comparison would I need to see to be truly convinced?